What's up, guys? It's Steve Braconi with Team Braconi, Christie's International Real Estate, here with Alfredo Vestola. We got a pretty packed show for you today. Some good topics Alfredo came up with, so we'll go through them. Any questions or comments, feel free to send them in, and we look forward to a good show.
I'm glad to be back. I missed last week. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Whatever it was. Glad to be back.
What do you got for us?
So we got a couple different topics. We're going to start off with, we've talked a lot about our team in the past podcast episodes, and we want to kind of dive into a little more specific of how we go about, when we want to bring someone on board, because of everything that we've talked about of how we structure our team and how many tools we put in place for them. And so, on the back end for us, it's kind of not only time consuming, but also there's a certain expense to it. So let's touch upon first the dynamics of our team and how we select an agent, basically.
Yeah, I think we've spoke about it briefly before on the podcast, but the way that we structure the team is more closely orientated with a corporate structure where we provide a lot for the agent in the sense of softwares, staff, lead generation. So there's a cost involved, both financially and with time.
Right.
So as you know, we interviewed several agents in the last week or two, and I called you and said, I don't know, I don't think they're a good fit. And it's not that they will or won't be good agents. I really don't know that in the long run, but there's a number of things we look up front to see if there'll be a good fit, both within the team as far as personality goes, but also will they appreciate the things that we offer? What have they currently done or not done to be able to appreciate that? Because if you take someone that really doesn't know any better, they just get their license and they come to the team, they have nothing to compare that to. So they think that might be standard or normal. What we found over time was that agents that excelled the best with our system was an agent that was willing to work hard, obviously honest and ethical. All that certainly plays in, but someone who's willing to work hard and someone who appreciates the things that we offer versus everything else that's out there. So the two candidates I recently interviewed, there was different reasons why we didn't ultimately feel they'd be a good fit for the team. But ultimately, I felt like both candidates seemed to think it was going to be much easier than it is.
Yeah. Even
when you put the systems in place that we have, even when you provide the agents appointments, provide them an internal sales agent to do follow-ups for them, provide them softwares, provide them drip campaigns and mailers and everything that we provide, it's still a tough industry.
Nothing beats hard work. We've said it many times.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you start looking for some sort of magic pill or some sort of easily calculated formula that's going to get you to the top, there's really nothing that's going to surpass hard effort and persistent effort and being consistent with your efforts throughout time.
Yeah. And I think going along with that is when we are talking to people, it's what have they done in the past? Like you mentioned, do they have that drive, that hunger? We can sometimes see based on maybe body language or things that they say that it doesn't really, that it might not be a good fit for us.
It's very little subtle things that I noticed over time.
Right.
To your point, it's exactly right. If they say something that's sort of in line with, they feel as though it's something like, I know for sure that I'll be a top producer. That's a confident statement, but it's like, what is your pathway to get there? What is the strategy you're going to take? And and if I ask that follow-up question, they have no idea. Yeah, so that's great. That's great to say, I'm going to get to the top. That's fine.
Yeah. We've had that a couple of times. That is a pretty funny one. It's like, obviously you want to have these goals and ambitions, but if you came to me and said, I want to be a top producer and this is my path to get there, that's great. I mean, that's exactly what we need, right? But just the blanket statement of, not even knowing the course you have to take, or I want to work the luxury market and you just started. That's just
one of the things she said was, I want to focus on listings. Great. So does everyone else. That's awesome. But also listing inventory is so low. I told her, if you focus only on listings, and I said our team at one point when listings were much more abundant and there was a there was a good level of inventory. It wouldn't be uncommon for us to have 50, 60, 70, sometimes 80 listings within the team. And now if we have 12 to 15 active listings, that's a lot, because right when we put them on for number one, they usually go off, and under contract. So they're not even active anymore. Yeah. But if you're only focusing on that, I said, why would you leave out the buyer market? Why would you leave out the rental market? Why would you leave out all these? Well, I wouldn't, but I want to focus. Okay. But like, the inventory is down, I think 42% or something like that on the MLS. 100%. So it's like,
I mean, if you are an agent that farms a very specific town, or maybe even a section of a town, and you're relying on just the listings, well, then what, right? You got to figure out how you can work another part of the industry that you maybe never really concentrate on.
Yeah. So I know for sure, because I've gone through this, that there's going to be a number of storms, so to speak, or things that test your ability mentally, physically to push through. And if I see that someone truly believes it's going to be easier, far easier than it's actually going to be, then I don't feel like they're going to be a good fit. So that's the number one thing I look for, other than, again, being honest and that sort of thing. And then they have to appreciate these things. So for us, we're able to weed out a lot of agents, so to speak, in the sense that, sometimes they have virtually no track record, but they have all these expectations and needs, but they've literally never sold a house. And the reality is the industry, generally speaking, will retain and hire as many agents as possible. And it's in power for them as in numbers. If they do one deal a year, they're ahead. I mean, that's what some of these larger agencies do. They'll hire anyone.
Well, it's not just it's just the realtor association in general. The more membership they have, the larger association.
But even within brokers, because if they sell one house every 2 years, it doesn't cost them anything. No. They're paying their own dues, and they don't provide them anything. But with our team, we are providing things. It's costing a few $1,000s a month to have an agent. And if they don't produce over a length of period of time and there's a loss there, we have to first try to assist that agent, get them up to speed, make sure that they produce. And then unfortunately, sometimes we have to cut agents because they just don't have that effort or that drive or that ability to produce.
Yeah. So to that point of some of the things we look for, what are the things we look for on the positive side that you would say are key indicators that would show that that particular agent may have more potential than some of the other ones that where we make a decision based on conversation and body language that they may not be a good fit?
To be honest, that's changed over time. So the number one thing I look for now is that they're a nice person.
Yeah, 100%.
It sounds so simple, but it's true, because first of all, I want nice people around me and the team. It won't cause unnecessary drama. Those things can spread and create a negative situation within the team. But more than that, someone that's nice and reflects positively can build relationships a lot better, and long-term relationships, which is sustainable business. If you're not a nice person or a genuine person, then that's out. So that's the number one thing, that they're honest and that they're nice. The second thing is that they would have the ability and time to put aside to grow the business. So someone that's responsible for 3 or 4 children, driving them here, driving them there, also working a part-time job. It's not to say that they couldn't do it, but it's going to certainly be statistically more difficult, less probable that they would produce at a high level if they've got other things. And quite honestly, children are going to be a priority. They should be. So, but they've got those other priorities that would go ahead of their real estate business. Whereas if someone's children are grown or they don't have children yet, and this is going to be their number one drive is to produce, make money in real estate, establish a business, that's going to be someone that we would look for in the team, because we're going to try to take agents who are producing at a certain level or just starting to produce and bring them up to a top level.
Yeah. I sometimes I look for things that they say about their past experience or what they're willing to do going forward. And you have to sometimes, weed that out, because people are going to say things, in an opportunity position. But
we can look too on the MLS and see what they have or haven't done.
Right.
So
are they willing to, work weekends for multiple months or maybe multiple years? Are they willing to show all kinds of properties to figure out what their specific specialty may be, or just because they're driven to do that? And that's going to be, at the end of the day, those initial lower price point leads, bring you to possibly where you want to go, because it's just connections. This
100%.
industry is all
It's a
connections.
spider web.
So I think what I look for in a person is that they're gonna understand that this is a relationship business, and I don't care who you're talking to. Eventually, you do enough of it, you're gonna build the business that you want.
But the bottom line is that when I'm interviewing agents, and I've done that for 10, 12 years now, there's very few times an agent doesn't say, I'll do whatever it takes. Like I'm willing to work weekends. I'm willing to work nights.
Yeah.
And you and I both know that how many out of 100 are, when it comes down to it, are actually willing to not go on that vacation, not work that evening, not go out that evening and work, not go to the football game and actually work that weekend. It's very few. We even have agents on the team that, they're kind of ready to kind of get to the next level, but they take a lot of time. That's fine. That's a personal choice. I chose to sacrifice a lot of that, good or bad, and that's what propelled me to the next level. So you want someone that's willing to make part or all of those sacrifices in order to do that. Everyone will say they'll do it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Very few will actually do it.
So sometimes you have to kind of pluck out. They're obviously going to mostly say these things, and some actually don't. It's easier to weed out, but it's what they say in between those statements that I think I try to pluck out.
Well, I've got 3 kids. They're in soccer. Okay, I know what that entails. I do. Yeah. There's multiple games, multiple practices. You're going to be running around. Who's going to drive them? So you start thinking, even if my hope or my goal is to do all this, you have logistical commitments that you have to attend to, right? So it doesn't mean you couldn't do it. It just means you have to work around all that and facilitate it and be even more efficient with your time.
Yeah, maybe you got to stay up till 2:00 in the morning too.
So those are some of the things that we look for when entertaining.
Just segueing into it, somewhat of a similar topic is what do you feel makes a good team leader, or just a leader in general? Because we're talking about putting a team together. So what are the dynamics that the new team agent can fall back on, or look up to, that will help them, guide them in the right direction?
Many things. I think some of the agents on the team realize, because they see myself, and quite honestly you, because you manage a lot of the team, and what we do, and they're like, I don't want to do that. Like, so you got to understand, if you're willing to kind of take a step back to try to help other people and propel other people's careers forward. With that said, you still have to lead by example. So there's a delicate balance there where, I don't expect or try to encourage agents to do anything that I haven't done. And I'm probably much more of an extreme than I'm when I'm recommending, because we're trying to create this team and this platform that's much more efficient for the agent to get to a similar place that I got to in a more difficult path, because I didn't have the contacts and the system in place and the budget in place that we're offering, and the credentials that we have now and the accolades, right? So to lead by example, for sure. I also think with any leader, you have to have the ability to treat individuals as such. We have protocols in place. We're fair across the board as far as what we offer, and the rules are the rules for the team. What we expectations are expectations, but how you get to a certain place with an agent might be very different. I don't treat every agent identically in the sense of how I speak with them, how I interact with them, or how I motivate them. And I think that's important. Some agents, like myself, I think you would agree, we're harder on, in the sense that you can point out exactly what occurred and it's direct. And I appreciate that, but I know a lot of people don't. And if anything, that will discourage them. So in that case, I might point out what they did right and say, try to tweak this other part, right? So with agents, although the goal is nearly identical, the goal is to become as efficient as possible with converting leads into relationships, which are closings, which are clients, and then do such a good job, you get referrals back and you build your business. So that's pretty much the goal across the board. But how we get there with each agent, as you know, it's very different. It's a very different path. It's a different timeline. It's a different approach, and it has to be. So I think one of the things that I learned early on, and I think, I have weaknesses like everyone else, but I think one of my strengths, is the ability to speak to agents a little bit differently. and articulate a little bit differently and encourage them a little bit differently, depending on their response, depending on what they're responding well to.
Right. So number one, you mentioned, set do something or ask someone to do something that you would also do yourself, which I think I can attest to. When we were kind of starting off earlier, I was kind of a little surprised as to see the amount of stuff that you were doing. I remember so many things that we've done, like in your garage.
Yeah.
Literally counting. And Steve would be doing that, right? It's not like hiring someone to do it, or it's just let's get it done. And that set always a good example for me. I was a hard worker always, just because of my upbringing, but it continued my belief and helped me grow as an agent, because it was like seeing another example of just putting in the effort, because you have to do it. If you want someone else to do it, you're gonna have to do it yourself as well. So I really like that that first key. And I wrote something different, and it was basically along the same lines as what you wrote down, or what you stated is, you have to have like a more emotional intelligence versus being the smartest one in the room. I mean, you could be both, but if you don't have that emotional intelligence, and what I mean by that is basically what you were saying, how do I handle every single situation? Each agent's going to be different. And forget about the transactions. That's a whole nother conversation. But each agent on a 20 agent team, for example, is going to have different characteristics, different way that they are motivated, right? So you being able to navigate that, that's a huge way to build your business.
I've also seen a lot of team leaders, and I don't want to say it's wrong, but it's almost like they talk down to the agents at times, or say things in a negative fashion where why would you do that, or something like that. I really believe everyone on our team, at least in some category, is more intelligent or smart than myself, certainly yourself included. So I've tried to put people around me that would bring me up and offer me some insight to other things. I certainly am not the smartest guy. I certainly work harder than most, I believe, and I'm not the dumbest person either, but I try to surround myself by people that could offer something and I can learn from. Every agent on our team is smart in various ways, and probably smarter than me in multiple ways. It is what it is, but I want that around me. I want to be that nucleus. I had one of my wife's friends contact me yesterday. She's in Florida. She's just starting a real estate career, which was news to me. But she said, "Do you have some advice for me?" So I spoke to her for 20 minutes or so. But I said, I don't know if you remember this, but I used to sit at a coffee table and fold like an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And that was my mail. Cause I was saying, just send out 100 mailers, 200 mailers. Like now we send out whatever, 60,000. But she said, I remember that. I remember sitting in your living room with Alyssa, my wife, and having a drink or whatever. And you sitting at the coffee table all night folding things. And like, I didn't want to do that, but to me, again, this is a no brainer. I can get these out. And if I do this right now, there's a chance that I'm going to drive some more business. If I don't do this, and just sit on the couch and watch TV like we're doing, then there's no chance. So I was always trying to do something during the moment that would better my career, so much to an extreme that, maybe I would have dialed it back a little bit. But again, I don't ask any of the agents to do anything that I wouldn't have done myself, for sure.
Oh, you definitely don't. Yeah, 100%. I can attest to that. So, to reiterate, that's kind of the sacrificing of time. If you're willing as a leader to sacrifice the time, that's going to reflect or trickle down to the other.
It's a lot of time. And also I think it's very important that the team leader starts to immediately take a back seat to the general brokerage. When you came to me and it was just you and I, it was a hard step for me, because I would give you deals, and those were deals I would have had myself. Right. But I knew that was the path that was best for you at the time and for me, because then here we are later with a large team. But I knew that was a way to help you grow your career, which would help me and help us facilitate what we did. And we've done it. But that's a very difficult thing to do at first. Now I outsource, I don't know,
that's a great
95.
Point.
I just, you called me the day, hey, I got this listing lead.
Yeah.
Do you want it?
Yeah.
Which I do take some listings still. It's right in my wheelhouse of where it was. Yeah. It's a price point that I would take. And what did I say?
Nope.
I said, you take it. I said, you take it because, number one, you deserve it, certainly. But number two, that's the long-term vision. The long-term vision is to give back to you guys, the agents, especially those that give to the team, so that it's sustainable. I can't, as a team leader, have a conflict of interest and take the best stuff constantly. And I try not to.
Yeah. So we'll append that. It's willing to sacrifice time and business somewhat, in a sense.
Yeah. A half step back to go infinite forward.
Exactly. That's I think you hit the same points that I had before when we were discussing.
I didn't even read the points. Yeah, probably.
No, I'm saying I think you had the same responses as I had on that. So that's pretty interesting. So kind of off topic from there, we're going to talk about what are some things, this might be a little fun, hopefully. What are some things you wish buyers or sellers knew ahead of time before we even said hello to make a transaction smoother, or just kind of make the whole process a little bit more, an easier process and more understanding, where, I think sometimes as agents, we get a bad rap, and maybe some are deserved, because there are, in any industry, there are going to be some bad apples, but, there are things that would be easier to communicate if some buyers or sellers maybe had a better understanding beforehand.
There's a lot that obviously would make our life easier if the clients knew, sellers and buyers, but that's our job, is to inform them. We do this every day, and I don't pretend to go in a different industry that I'm not in and know what someone knows that does it every day. It depends on the market, would be the answer to the question. So in this current market where there's just no inventory and we still continue to see multiple bids on everything, you can try to guide a buyer on a property on what you think they need to do to have a shot at securing the property. You can align them with a lender that would have a pre-approval, that they're reputable, so it might strengthen the offer a little bit. There's things we could do. There's contingencies we could remove that still are relatively safe for the client. We'll let them know the risks, but to strengthen their offer. But as we know, it's rare that the first time they go through that process that they listen to everything that the advisor or the agent says, because we're in sales. So likely they think they're just trying to make it easy, when in reality, I know in our team, it's certainly not the case. We're just trying to give them a chance. And even when we do all those things, we know, and from our experience, there's probably a 50-50 chance they even get this anyway.
That's right.
So to answer your question for the team and how many offers I see that have to go through to get something to be accepted, I wish, which that doesn't go very far, that the client would have the ability to see what we've seen for a period of time, so that when they're ready to buy, they understand the market, the condition, the industry, and what is necessary to do at this point to have a chance at securing the property, so they don't have to go through the frustrating process of making that offer, not even being close, losing that, probably losing a second one. And maybe at that point, maybe they start to realize where the market actually is and try to adjust some offers so that they have a chance at securing the property.
Yeah, for me, I think it's there's a few. I mean, there's a lot, obviously, but it's you're building a good relationship, and sometimes you feel like they trust you completely, and then when it comes to referring vendors, right? That's a big one for our team and our industry in general. There's probably a misconception of why things are done, but generally speaking, we're trying to put a team around us, and I don't just mean that in our own team. I mean the team of vendors, as we discussed many times in the podcast. So who's the inspector? Who's the lender? Who's the attorney? And we've said this before, but there's a reason why we do that. It's just like, when you're putting a sports team together, you're going to try to put the best people around you, even the offensive coordinator and the head coach and every piece of the puzzle makes a good team. So we want to maximize our success, which is basically winning would be closing a transaction for the client. And doing that is going to be working with lending partners or attorneys or inspectors that we know have great track records. We know they have great customer service. We know that they are going to look out for your best interests while moving the transaction along in the proper time period. So for me, my wish would be understanding that part better. Obviously people will want to shop around when it comes to lending, for example.
Which is fine, but oftentimes they don't realize the value of a local lender. We selected lenders, and we work with only a couple that produce at such a high level. They have a very good reputation. I know when I'm on the listing side, which is I'm representing the seller, and I see one of their pre-approvals come through, I know it's a lot stronger than maybe a national bank. And we try to explain to the client where that's fine. You can use whoever you want, but there's more failure rate in our experience. So I represent a lot of sellers. And if I see that bank come through with pre-approval, I know they don't do much due diligence. I know that. So I know the probability of that loan failing, even if you're totally qualified, is just greater, especially with condominiums. There's other factors that go into it that they don't really underwrite or go through the whole process like the local lenders. And then to your point, when you go to the attorney, there's things that are well worth fighting over or arguing over or positioning for within a real estate transaction legally. There's other things that I've seen that really make literally no difference. And attorneys have this pride thing. Sometimes they flex their muscles and they kill the deal with emotion back and forth. And they've convinced their client that this is a big deal, even though we know 100% it's not a big deal. And here's why. We can explain it. So it's important to have the right lender. It strengthens your offer with the pre-approval, and we know it's going to close, because a lot of times they go down the path and then 3 days before closing with the closing statement, they get a denial letter, and then it's like scramble to try to get a new lender. You're in breach of contract because the time's run out and blah, blah, blah. It's just unnecessary risk of losing the deal, and certainly stress. The attorney is important, in my opinion, because they know if it's a reputable attorney that specializes in real estate, they will focus in on what's most important for the client and protect their interest without unnecessarily killing deals. And also, if it's an attorney that we work with, that we give a lot of volume to, we have the ability to contact them on their cell phone, to contact them in evenings and weekends. And sometimes, even though we don't do emergency services, time kills deals. And if we can't get a hold of the attorney because they're in court or just not returning our calls, that will kill a deal over the course of time, right? And then with the home inspector, you want someone who is extremely thorough. The last thing I want is a client going to a home and being unhappy with us or the inspector later. So you want someone 100% fair, honest, thorough, but you want them to be able to write the report and explain what really is a significant issue and maybe what is a Home Depot $7 item. It's really not a big deal. You have to have someone who is fair with explaining the process and not an alarmist. Right. So those three things aligned.
Well, it's also, we've kind of talked about this before. It's this could be, or they could be something that happens with an inspection, for example, as they see an item and maybe they think it's possibly this, right? So like putting an opinion doesn't really
helps no one.
Doesn't help no one. So it's not only verbally their presence explaining to the client, but also in writing in the report.
We had an inspector recently say, "Oh, I doubt they had a permit for this." It's kind of unnecessary. Number one, as we know, they need to have all permits closed to get the certificate of occupancy to close. So we would find that out regardless. But number two, you're speculating over something that may or may not be the case. You would be better off to tell the client, just make sure all the permits are closed or that they've gotten permits for everything before closing, right? Then, hey, I doubt that. I mean, how do you? They may be right, they may be wrong, but now you're an alarmist over something that might not even exist.
But I think, personally, I think agents do struggle with that, the process of making the intro to each of those separate vendors to put that team together. And then sometimes the client themselves, you got a great relationship, and then they just go complete opposite direction for whatever reason. They, and I feel like this sometimes, that they think maybe you're trying to steer them in a certain direction. And in a sense, yes, but that direction this is your best chance for success, because we've done it, over and over again.
I feel like, my numbers speak for themselves, but I feel like I'm very good at building a relationship that is engulfed in trust. So I don't really find an issue with that, but it doesn't start in the last minute where you're trying to refer someone. I've provided them the team of associates that we work with. I explained why we work with those people, why I've chosen to hand select and refer those people. And if I have the relationship with the client that I hope to, when that comes, they're going to listen. They're going to listen because I would listen to them. If it was their industry and I trust them, I'm going to listen to them.
Yeah. And one other thing I feel like often is misunderstood by the general public is the buyer representation and seller representation. I think a lot of times, especially with these sites like Zillow, they're reaching out. They don't know if they're talking to, an ISA, or they're talking to the listing agent. I think a lot of times they think they're just reaching out to the listing agent, and there's a lot of confusion with that. So that might also help clear up the agent's role in the transaction and make things a little bit smoother. So with that, let's also dive into discussing the not only the current market condition, we'll get into that, but the basically the art of negotiations, especially in this climate. What are some strategies that we can provide some of the buyers struggling out there, and some of what I just talked to will apply as far as putting the right terms and team together. What are some of your perspectives from years of negotiating and being very good at it?
One of the things we started, the basic stuff obviously is the terms of the contract, the lender, if you can go cash, the waiving the contingencies, which would be appraisal, the mortgage commitment, the down payment is going to make a difference. So all those things in strengthening the offer is going to be very important. I obviously would recommend, if it's a lender involved, a finance deal, the lender calls the other side, seller in that example, seller's agent, and explains why this client's so qualified. I'm not going to have an issue. It's going to close. So those are all the basic stuff. But
they're basic, but people don't do it.
Yeah,
I think they don't think it's basic.
I think you have to do all that.
Yeah.
I think you have to strengthen your offer on paper as much as humanly possible. Through waiving some of those contingencies, limiting the contingencies, increasing the down payment, going cash if you can, strengthening it with strong pre-approval, a lender that's local that may be willing to contact the other side, explain why they're so strong, that I can close it no problem, all that. With that said, I think the inventory still remains such a factor and such a frustrating issue. So when something comes available that's in a certain price point in a certain zip code, we know, because we have people waiting, there's going to be still 10, 20, sometimes 30 offers on something like that. So what we're starting to do in the team is geographically spread out. We just joined another multiple listing service. So there are still pockets that are similar that we could offer our clients that they may not even realize. In our market, it's a little different.
And they may not want to go there right away, but
they may not even know.
Yeah, they may not know.
They may not want to go, but they may not know. A lot of the clients that I've taken to towns, they didn't even know those towns really existed. And a lot of them aren't worse off or much further proximity wise. It's just a different area. A lot of these clients that we have are coming from Manhattan, along the Hudson River.
Yeah, they're exploring a new world.
Right. So it's a little different if you have a client that's trying to stay in town. I absolutely have to be in town. My kids are in a school system. That's one thing. We have the majority of our clients are not that. The majority of our clients are coming from a different area, usually upsizing, some are downsizing, but they're open with reasonable suggestions. So what we're telling our agents now is to start to spread out geographically, but do it strategically. If they want a certain town, try to give them a town that's similar, even if it's a little bit of ways, but it's a similar, maybe property tax, similar school system rankings, similar size lots, similar price point, or maybe even a little bit more advantageous price point for the same type of product. That is becoming a little bit more common. And quite honestly, those areas that perhaps you could argue were less sought after in a different market now are a totally improved situation for the client. People are flocking there because there's no inventory and it's basically a sold out zone, where you're sick of competing for one home with 30 other people. So you're going to go to another maybe zip code that's beautiful as well, but maybe there's 5 or 10 people you're competing with. So you have a much better shot at getting that property.
Improve your chances.
So geographically it would be my answer to that right now.
Yeah. I mean, I number one thing I say is what is the current market condition we're in? What's the market, right? So some buyers may not want to hear it, but we're in a seller's market, right? So now we have to do what? We have to make the seller happy. I don't want to, I'm not trying to lean towards, the seller's preferences, but that's what's going to get the deal done, right? So we've had countless deals where we found out that our agent, myself even, you're not doing too many buyer representations, but we find out that we're not the best or highest offer. Best, yes, but not the highest offer. So those terms that you mentioned are paramount to getting a deal done, because of what I was saying is what's the easiest path for the seller to move on, to do what they need to do, right? So you may have an offer that's $50,000 higher, but it's put together, very poorly. The lender is never heard of them. The attorney might be out of state. That does not give the seller, and maybe if the seller doesn't even know, they're going to rely on their listing agent to give them this advice, right? So these are the things that going to help you in negotiation, is understanding that you have to have a strong offer, and that doesn't just mean what is my offer number. It has to be competitive, of course, but
It's all the
you
terms.
can win. You can win, and we've done it with having stronger terms overall, not just the number.
The last point you have, I think, is really important, which is you basically are asking why aren't prices declining across the board. Inventory is obviously the answer, but as I started thinking about it more and more and getting more calls from clients who want to sell, and especially if they want to downsize, what's happening is they're in these homes for 3% or so, sometimes 4%, sometimes 2.8% mortgage rate. And what they're finding is if they sell their home, even if it's $1.5 million or whatever, and they're trying to downsize to 850 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I'm making these numbers up, obviously, but they want to downsize pretty significantly. The carrying costs are still the same and sometimes more.
Yeah.
So because the interest rates are now 7.5% or so, to carry something that of less value, 30%, let's say, sometimes, depending on the situation, can cost you more per month than just staying in the bigger property. So they don't want to, the purpose of downsizing, although they may not need all that space, is oftentimes to not waste money in their eyes, to save money, 100%. To be more efficient. And now by doing so and taking a smaller space with today's mortgage rates, it's costing them more to hold the smaller property. So yes, I think that the interest rates coming down will obviously encourage even more buyer volume, first-time buyers, people that have been priced out of the market. We heard that stat the other day with, I think the average home used to cost $1,700 a month, and now the same home would cost $3,800 a month based on the interest rate. It was like 360 something, and now it's $480,000 or something like that. Those are rough numbers. Mm-hmm. And that's only since November 2019 to now. So it's priced a lot of people from $1,700 a month on average to $3,800. That's a huge difference. So a lot of people have been priced out of the market. So I do think lowering the interest rates will get a lot of those people back in play and trying to buy something that haven't been able to. But I think the bigger catalyst from what I'm seeing is the people that are ready to downsize or sell a property to buy something else. It would allow them to do that, because once they run that, they're ready to go. I give them the price. Oh, that's great. Blah, blah. Then they start to price out what it would cost them to buy something with today's mortgage rates. And 9 times out of 10, I get the call, we're ready to move forward with you. We just got to wait till the interest rates come down, because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to make the swap right now. So to answer your question in the most direct fashion possible, I do believe it's interest rates, but I don't think it's just based on the first-time buyers getting priced out, which originally was the obvious answer. I think it's a lot of people that own these properties that are paying half the interest rate that they would today. And once that drops and it gets at least comparable or closer to what they're currently paying, then it would make sense for them to make the swap, the downsize.
Exactly.
And then not only do you get the listing, which is inventory, but then they're going to buy something. So it's going to propel the real estate market to move forward. And I think, like I said, we're down 42% or something like that on New Jersey MLS, something like that, with transactions.
Significant.
So I think that it's half the transactions from last year. But I think a lot of that reason is people are sitting tight. 100%. They want to make a move, and it doesn't make any financial sense to make the move because the interest rates are where they are.
I mean, we also have accidental landlords. You do get a transaction out of that. So instead of 2, you get 1.
Right.
And that's why probably it kind of runs with the numbers that you were just mentioning. An accidental landlord is, I just spoke to one of my clients yesterday. They have 2.7. They're not going to sell their house.
Yeah,
it's like lower
money.
than that. It's lower. I told us it's free money. It's lower than the CPI. It's like, what, they're probably, well, she actually was, had a 15 year, so she doubled her payment. So she'll get her equity faster, but her monthly payment is lower than what she can get it for rent. Right. Plus it's just a super low rate. That's why why would you want to make a move?
Right.
So I think one thing that may change is with the amount of equity built in, maybe some people start trading that equity away, but a large inventory spike is we don't really see it right now. So hopefully, as you mentioned, rates can start to tick down, so we'll have a little more balancing act.
And we should see some increase in inventory. Seasonally, historically, in the fall, we see a natural increase where people start to put homes back in the market that they didn't want to deal with in the dog days of the summer in August and even July.
Yeah.
So we should see that, but I think ultimately the treasury bonds, which are linked to the interest rates, will drive that eventually. And if they come down, which a lot of people are forecasting that they do, then I think you'll see an uptick in inventory, just because people will be able to sell and take their money out and get a reasonable interest rate to downsize.
Yeah, it's like you said, you have to pull out a calculator now. Like before, it's no brainer. I'm going to downsize. I'm going to save money. Now you have to pull out what's my monthly expense to run this huge house,
because they move so fast in the wrong direction.
Because even if you downsize, you're going to save money on the operation of the house, right? The running of the home. It's going to save. But was it a significant number that it makes sense financially? Because you're jumping from a higher price home to a lower, what should have been a lower mortgage payment, or if you do get a mortgage, but it's not the case. Sometimes it's even higher, which is crazy. So
that's what we had. So anyone has any questions or concerns or follow-ups with that, we're available. You can DM us Braconi at Vast Real Estate, at Team Braconi. We appreciate everyone watching as always. We're excited for the fall market. We appreciate all the support.
That's what I was going to say. I'm definitely excited for the fall market.
Fall market be
summer's, it's still hot, so summer's not over yet. But if kids are back to school, feels like we're getting.
We feel the uptick in the volume of calls. We feel the uptick in people that are getting closer to sell, regardless of the interest rates. So we'll see some activity. Again, anyone has any questions, reach out anytime.
Yeah, but also, if anyone has any feedback or comments or some things that they feel like we as agents would be better informed when we're dealing with clients, like any comments, feedback about what we talked about today would be awesome.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Appreciate it.